Main parachute packing procedures for the free-fall assembly of the RA-1 ram air parachute system. Pack. Proper layout. Lay the parachute assembly on a clean, dry surface with the canopy positioned on its left side. The leading edge will be on the right when viewed from the riser end. Rough dress the canopy by grasping the high points, extending the suspension line to full length, ensuring there are 4 distinct suspension line groups, and position the harness container with the harness facing down. Remove any turns, tangles, or twists between the suspension line groups. If the slider is collapsed, pull on the tabs at the rear of the slider to release the locking mechanism. Then expand the slider to full width. Route the main ripcord cable through the main cable housing and insert the main ripcord into the main ripcord pocket. Insert closing loop in the closing loop stow pocket on flap 1 with the loop through the grommet furthest away from the top of the flap. Perform 4-line check. Stand between suspension line groups B and C with the back toward the upper end. Grasp suspension line B10 with the left hand and C10 with the right hand. Trace the suspension lines down through the right grommets of the slider to the connector links on the risers. Ensure each line runs free and clear from the canopy to the connector link. Suspension line B10 runs to the outside of the right front connector link, and C10 runs to the outside of the right rear connector link. Return to the canopy and trace suspension lines B1 and C1 through the left grommets of the slider to the connector links on the risers. Ensure each line runs free and clear from the canopy to the connector links. Suspension line B1 runs to the outside of the left front connector link, and C1 runs to the outside of the left rear connector link. Grasp upper, left, and right steering line groups. Trace both steering line groups down through the rear grommets of the slider, through the guide rings on the risers, and to the steering toggles. Ensure each line group runs free and clear from the canopy to the steering toggles. If necessary, rotate the toggles to remove any twists in the steering lines. Use a pull-up cord and temporarily tie the connector links together below the barrel nut with the steering lines in the center of the tie. Flake canopy. Note, a partner may be used only during flaking the canopy. Grasp the high points of the cells and rotate top half of canopy toward the harness container. Start with the high points of cell 1 and pull out the seam. Then smooth the cell from the leading edge to the trailing edge. Continue to flake the canopy cell high points by pulling out the seams one by one on each remaining cell. Smooth each cell until all cells are flaked and all line groups are clearly separated. Grasp the high points of cell 9 at the leading edge and extend outward, smoothing out each cell. Continue with cell 8 at the leading edge and work through the leading edge of cell 1, extending outward and smoothing out each cell.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 1, after proper layout. Main ripcord is installed. Main release ripcord installed. Risers attached to harness. Trim straps fully elongated and risers lie flat. Slider expanded to full width. Line check complete and connector links tied.
Go to work.
Long fold canopy. Note, while folding the canopy, ensure the line groups are stacked and remain in tight groups in the center of the canopy. Carefully fold the leading edge at the A suspension line group under toward the floor. Hold the high points that are in line with the A lines, maintaining slight tension on the suspension lines with the left hand. Grasp the high points that are in line with the B lines, maintaining slight tension on the suspension lines with the right hand. Lift the B lines and stack them on top of the A lines, creating an S-fold of the canopy material to the right of the B lines. The A and B lines should be centered between the S-fold. Using the same method with the C and D lines, continue to long fold the canopy. Split the steering line groups to the left and right of the folded canopy and continue to split the tail to the left and right until reaching the red tab on the center cell, exposing suspension lines inside the folded canopy. Grasp all the A, B, C, and D lines at the base of the stabilizers. Flake the stabilizers 3 left and 3 right of the canopy, outboard of the suspension lines. Locate and group the C-lines to the middle of the folded main canopy and separate the C-line magnets. Create an air channel by dividing the left and right sides of the canopy, clearing all canopy material to the outside of the individual line groups as follows. Grasp the 4 D lines to the left and right sides of the canopy and clear all material between the D and C lines to the outside and ensure the suspension lines remain in the center of the canopy with slight tension. Grasp the 4 C lines to the left and right sides and clear all canopy material between the C and B lines to the outside and ensure the suspension lines remain in the center of the canopy with slight tension. Grasp the 4 B lines to the left and right sides and clear all canopy material between the B and A lines to the outside and ensure the suspension lines remain in the center of the canopy with slight tension. Separate the material between the 5 left and 5 right A lines by applying tension to the center of the radial tape on cell 5 toward the top of the canopy, completing the air channel and revealing the packing surface. Maintaining the air channel, group the B, C, and D lines back to the center of the folded canopy. Locate and group the 8 D lines to the middle of the folded main canopy and place them between the C-line magnets. Enclose the center 8 D suspension lines inside the C suspension line magnets and mate the magnets together. Grasp the lower right B line attached to the stabilizer and trace the radial tape from the line attachment point to the second seam on the stabilizer. Dress the stabilizer material between the B and C line canopy folds, ensuring the B line is brought to the center of the canopy with the other lines. Grasp the lower C line attached to the stabilizer and trace the radial tape from the line attachment point to the second seam on the stabilizer. Dress the stabilizer material between the C and D line canopy folds, ensuring the C line is brought to the center of the canopy with the other lines. Grasp the lower right D line attached to the stabilizer and trace the radial tape from the line attachment point to the second seam on the stabilizer. Dress the stabilizer material between the D lines and trailing edge of the canopy, ensuring the D line is brought to the center of the canopy with the other lines. Utilizing the same technique, dress the other side of the stabilizer. The long fold of the canopy is now complete. Set deployment brakes. Caution: failure to remove twists from the steering lines may cause damage to the equipment. Grasp both steering lines at the cascade portion and trace the steering lines, removing all turns, tangles, and twists. Pull either main steering toggle until the brake loop passes through the guide ring on the main riser. Insert the top tab of the main steering toggle into the brake loop. Insert both tabs of the main steering toggle into the pockets on the main riser. Ensure the excess steering line is routed to the outside edge of the riser and the steering line is to the inside edge of the riser. S-fold the excess main steering line and place it into the hook and loop fastening tape keeper. Ensure the inner protective flap is over the folded steering line. The main steering line does not exceed the length of the keeper. It is not trapped between the hook and loop tapes and remains to the inside edge of the riser. Fasten the button on the toggle with the snap on the main riser. Utilizing the same method, stow the other steering line. Fold trailing edge. Move to the right side of the main canopy and carefully place the right side of the trailing edge to the left side of the folded main canopy. Locate steering line 1 at the left corner of the trailing edge and place it on the stacked suspension line, keeping tension on the steering line and folding the main canopy fabric to the outside. Place the next steering line on top of the suspension line and flake the trailing edge to the outside. Repeat the procedure for the remaining steering lines to the same side of the canopy, keeping tension on the lines and taking care not to invert the panel. Continue to flake the trailing edge, placing rib seams on the stack of lines until reaching the red tab sewn into the seam at the center of the trailing edge. Continue to flake the left side of the canopy over the right side until reaching steering line 5 on the left side of the canopy. Locate main steering line 5 at the left corner of the trailing edge and place it on the stacked suspension line, keeping tension on the steering line and folding the main canopy to the outside. Place the next steering line on top of the suspension lines and flake the trailing edge to the outside. Repeat the procedure for the remaining steering lines on the same side of the main canopy until reaching steering line 1 at the left corner of the trailing edge and place it on the stacked suspension lines, keeping tension on the steering line and folding the main canopy to the outside edge. Carefully locate the center seam red tab and open the folded trailing edge and separating the left side to the left, right side to the right, maintaining slight tension on the steering lines in the center of the folded canopy. Grasp the rear line groups just above the connector link and gently place them to the outside of the front line group, clearing the slider. Grasp the slider by the center top portion and move it up the suspension line to the main canopy. Seat the slider grommet against the slider stop. Quarter the slider, ensuring that it is positioned with the data block facing up and visible. Locate the left rear slider grommet and lift it slightly to separate the front and rear suspension line groups. Extend the left middle portion of the slider between the front and rear line groups to the left stabilizers. Extend the right portion of the slider between the front and rear line groups into the right stabilizers. Dress the lead edge of the stabilizer slightly by lifting the left suspension line group and tuck the left lead edge of the slider to the left under the folded stabilizers. Dress the lead edge of the slider by slightly lifting the right suspension line group and tuck the right lead edge of the slider to the right under the folded stabilizers. Dress the trail edge of the slider by evenly tucking the left and right sides of the trail edge over the folded stabilizers. Check to ensure that 8D suspension lines are still secured with the C suspension line magnets and there is slight tension on all suspension and steering lines.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 2 after slider is up. Canopy long folding complete. Stabilizers clear, 3 left, 3 right. Ensure air channel is clear. D-lines are secured by magnets. Deployment brakes set. Trailing edge flaking complete. Slider is pulled up and quartered and positioned.
Go to work.
S-fold main canopy. Fold the right stabilizers to the center at a 45-degree angle, then fold the left stabilizers over the right stabilizers at a 45-degree angle, encasing the suspension lines, steering lines, and slider, ensuring the grommets are not rolled and remain flat. Hold the C-line magnets in place and pull the center of the trailing edge down to just below the front grommets and out past the first seam. Caution: when wrapping the trailing edge around the canopy, ensure the suspension and steering lines stay in place and do not wrap around the canopy. Ensure the trailing edge of the canopy is wrapped completely around the canopy and the left and right sides of the trailing edge overlap each other under the folded canopy. Wrap the trailing edge around the sides and under the canopy, encasing the folded canopy, with the left and right sides of the trailing edge overlapping each other under the folded canopy. Ensure the canopy shape is approximate width of the deployment bag. Make an 8-inch S-fold with the front slider grommets even with the bottom edge of the folded canopy. Form an S-fold with the top part of the canopy in the opposite direction, placing it on top of the lower part of the canopy. Form an S-fold with the top part of the canopy in the opposite direction, placing it on top of the lower part of the canopy. Fold the top portion of the canopy under, even with the top S-fold of the canopy. Ensure the bridle attachment point is fully exposed. Place canopy into the deployment bag. Warning: ensure that control of the folded canopy is maintained when placing the canopy in the deployment bag. If control is lost and the folds become indistinguishable, the canopy shall be completely flaked and folded from the beginning. Smooth the canopy out by removing all trapped air inside the canopy. Begin placing the canopy into the deployment bag, starting with one corner of the folded canopy and working the bag around the middle to the other corner. Work the canopy into the corners of the deployment bag, maintaining the two folds with the slider encased in the stabilizers and the tail and the suspension lines exiting the center of the bag.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 3, after canopy is in deployment bag. Canopy is centered with two folds present. Canopy slider and suspension lines are fully encased by trailing edge. Suspension lines remain centered between the two folds and exit the center of the deployment bag.
Go to work.
Close deployment bag. Fold the deployment bag flap over and pull the 2-inch retainer band through the center grommet on the flap. Make the first locking stow with a 2-inch retainer band and using a single wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the right with the running end facing to the left. Pull the 2-inch retainer band through the left grommet on the flap. Make the second locking stow with a 2-inch retainer band and using a single wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the left with the running end facing to the right. Pull the 2-inch retainer band through the right grommet on the flap. Make the third locking stow with a 2-inch retainer band and using a single wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the right with the running end facing to the left. Pull the 2-inch retainer band on the left side flap through the left grommet in the middle flap. Make the fourth locking stow with the 2-inch retainer band and using a double wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the left with the running end facing to the right. Pull the 2-inch retainer band on the right side flap through the grommet on the right middle flap. Make the fifth locking stow with a 2-inch retainer band and using a double wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the right with the running end facing to the left.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 4, after locking stows. Locking stows are secured approximately 2 inches. Locking stows 1, 2, and 3 are single wrap. 4 and 5 are double wrap.
Go to work.
Stow suspension lines. Flip the top of the deployment bag under, exposing the suspension line stow bars. Make the first suspension line stow to the upper left with a 2-inch retainer band and using a double wrap, form an approximate 2-inch stow to the left with the running end facing to the right and on top of the lines. Continue stowing the suspension lines with a double wrap of the retainer band, alternating stows to the left and right until approximately 16 inches of suspension lines remain. Place deployment bag into main container. Remove the pull-up cord that was temporarily tied to the riser connector link and insert into the closing loop. Rotate the main deployment bag over the reserve compartment and main compartment, placing the main deployment bag below the main compartment. Route the main risers along the outside of the reserve compartment and the suspension lines to the bottom of the main compartment, with the steering toggles facing inward. Mate the magnets in the riser stow flaps covering the main risers at the top of the harness container.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 5 after placement of risers. Approximately 16 inches of suspension lines remain after the last stow. Pull-up cord is removed from the connector link and inserted into the closing loop. Risers are properly positioned with rear risers to the inside and magnets are mated.
Go to work.
Place deployment bag into main container. Continues. Rotate the top of the main deployment bag into the upper part of the main compartment, keeping the suspension lines inside the main compartment. Remove any turns, tangles, or twists from the bridle. Insert the excess bridle into the bridle retaining channel. S-fold the bridle from the bottom to the top along the center of the launch pad. Compress the pilot chute onto the launch pad and distribute the pilot chute material around the spring. Ensure all the pilot chute material is under the cap. Close main container. Maintaining steady pressure on the pilot chute. Pull flap 1 over the pilot chute, centering the closing loop with the pull-up cord routed through it over the pilot chute. Route the pull-up cord through closing flap 2 and hold the flap tightly against flap 1, aligning the grommet. Pull up on the pull-up cord, exposing the closing loop above the grommet in flap 2. Route the pull-up cord through the closing flap 3 and hold the flap tightly against flap 2, aligning the grommet. Pull up on the pull-up cord, exposing the closing loop above the grommet in flap 3. Route the pull-up cord through closing flap 4 and hold the flap tightly against the flap 3, aligning the grommet. Pull up on the pull-up cord, exposing closing loop above the grommet in flap 4 and secure with the main ripcord pin. Route one end of the pull-up cord under the ripcord pin, pulling on the pull-up cord, removing it from the closing loop. Insert top of the ripcord pin protector flap into the pocket on flap 2. Account for all packing aids and fill out the main parachute log record.
Rigger check.
Rigger check 6 after packing complete. Pilot chute centered. Container closed. Bottom, top, left, right. All packing aids removed and accounted for. Log record filled out.